So good afternoon and welcome to our first ever Association for Interdisciplinary Studies Roundtable Talk. This Roundtable Talk is an opportunity for us to engage in informal conversations on topics of interest, critical topics, complex topics, controversial topics. It's an opportunity to share different perspectives and to increase our understanding, as well as to further the practice and implementation of interdisciplinarity. So I am Khadija Miller, and I am a member of the Association for Interdisciplinary Studies. I'm also the Vice President for Relations, and I'm really, really happy to invite all of you here. Before I introduce the current president of the Association for Interdisciplinary Studies, I just want to share some ground rules, if you will. So if you have any questions, we ask that you put them in the chat, and Jen and I will woman the chat, and we will try to include them in the initial discussion, but we will have time at the end for actual discussion. Okay, so again, thank you and welcome. And now I'm really, really excited to introduce our current president for the Association for Interdisciplinary Studies, Jennifer Delner.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everybody. I thought I was going to introduce Khadija, so now I'm not quite sure what my role is, except to welcome you to this first roundtable, one of many that we hope to hold virtually. So this, as you know, is a new format for us. So thank you for coming to join and talk and experiment. We're going to try to keep it really in an hour and make this a conversation as if we are all sitting around a table. I think it's a great initiative. Khadija and many others, Makil, had also pushed us in this direction, and Khadija took us up on it and said, okay, let's do it. Let's try it. So she is our wonderful VP of development. And I think without any further ado, so that we've got time, I will turn things back over to her and to our panelists. She'll introduce our panelists or conversants, and we will get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And I'm sorry, I was just running ahead of our scripts. So I'd like to introduce our three fabulous discussants, if you will. And I'll just go in alphabetical order. And so first we have Danny Adams, who's a professor of interdisciplinary studies at Norfolk State University. He holds degrees in philosophy, special education, and educational administration. He's held many administrative positions: assistant director of continuing education, acting dean of the School of General and Continuing Education. He's been associate dean of the College of Liberal Arts and chair of interdisciplinary studies, where he was pivotal in creating the first online degree program in interdisciplinary studies. He continues to serve as a critical link in online instruction and pedagogy in the college, where he also served as director of e-learning from 2004 to 2012. His research interests examine the nexus of theoretical paradigms having interdisciplinary validity and explanatory power for global and cultural issues. So I'm so happy to introduce and welcome Danny Adams. You could just wave, Danny. So, okay, perfect. Thank you. Next, I'm really excited to have May Malouf, and I apologize, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the last name. And so May Malouf is a retired professor, so jealous, of English literature at the Lebanese University Branch 2. She headed the English department 3 terms and participated in several committees in the faculty's deanship and in the Doctoral School for Literature, Human and Social Sciences. She has lectured in national, regional, and international conferences and published articles on James Joyce, Lord Byron, Shakespeare, Tahib Salih, and J.R. Haydar. She is the president of the Lebanese Lord Byron Society and assistant editor of the International Journal of Arabic and English Studies. Her current research interests are in interdisciplinary studies, romanticism, post-colonial theory, and cultural studies. Welcome, May. And last but not least, we have Allison Upshaw. Allison Upshaw holds the position of Assistant Professor of Voice at Stillman College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Dr. Upshaw is a trained opera singer, a professional actress, playwright, and it doesn't say here, and scholar. She has held positions as a diversity trainer, a college counselor, a Black Cultural Center director, and a professional poetry performer. She has more than 20 years experience providing curriculum design and diversity programming for educational systems and art organization. She holds a doctorate in interdisciplinary studies, aesthetic meaning making, performance, and education from the University of Alabama. And her publications include a book chapter as well as several articles in both traditional and multimodal formats. Thank you and welcome, Allison. So for this discussion, this initial discussion, we thought it would be timely to discuss what it means to be an interdisciplinarian and what it means to engage in interdisciplinarity in the midst of a global pandemic. I don't think any of us were around for the Spanish flu or for any of the other former global pandemics. So this is new to us. And so the overarching question that we want to begin with to our panelists, and I'll start in the same order of introduction. So I'll start with Danny and then May and then Allison. How can we intentionally address the interdisciplinarity of living, doing or not, teaching or not, creating or not, and surviving, I'm not going to say the or not because we're here, during a global pandemic? So the overarching question, how can we intentionally engage in this interdisciplinary thing? I'll start with you, Danny.
Thank you. Profound question. And it's one that we just hadn't thought about considering. However, I'd like to point out that the or not part of your questioning is exceedingly on point, I think. So I come from a perspective, and since I've been thinking about this, I think there's a project that I'm really getting caught up into, and I'm looking at living, the first part of your question, as encompassing everything else that you said. So for me, I'm getting interested in looking at how, I guess there's two major dimensions that being human, none of us can escape, and that's time and that is space, And it's interesting that when these things converge and are accelerated, exacerbated, and altered from a pandemic situation of social distancing, obviously, and in terms of our globalization, because it's not just the China disease. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's everywhere. So we have this collapse of time and space, and we are in it, and we can never escape those two dimensions. So what I've really been caught up in now is saying, well, how am I dealing with this alteredness in making decisions, in observing my own decision? It's like on hyper here. And so I would just like to, go on and on, but I'd like to mention one thing, for example, the information that we're getting. How do we deal with this information that we're getting? How do we deal with the presentation of information? And how do we deal with the absence of known information? So either you're presenting it or you're ignoring it. Someone is. How do I assimilate that? What's going on within me, or do humans, how do we negotiate that? And so just looking at information, the ubiquitousness of it, the rapidness of it, calls for some cancellations of what I previously thought and some cancellations of my valuing, because I have to do something. Well, what if I decide I don't want to do anything? Well, like the existential predicament, that not doing and not choosing is a choice, and it's doing. So I'm really wrapped up into this, and I'll just lay that there as it's involved me over many days now, looking at time and space, doing and not doing, the mental part and the praxis part. How do I negotiate this? And I'm finding that it actually is an interdisciplinary process. I need to look at history. Some newspapers are reporting, like the Kansas City Star, saying, oh, we apologize. When the civil rights things was going on, we did not even let people know what was going on in the neighborhood. We apologize for that. What? And other news media have done the same thing. So there's the presentation, and then dealing with the ignoring of that information. It just catches you. What am I supposed to do? So I have to make some decisions and draw on history that I know, and I have to draw on my own psychology. I have to draw on the issues that are there. So that's just my opening.
That was a lot. Thank you. For us but that's good. That's good. It gives us a lot to think about. And that's one of the goals, is to challenge and increase what we think about, what we consider. May?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm being challenged as much as many other people, since as I'm retired. And I guess I retired last year, and the whole country of Lebanon retired with me with lockdowns and rioting and the protestation that were going on last year and still going on this year. But the thing with the pandemic has really challenged me in one way, being at home, very much isolated, not quarantined, but under lockdowns on and off, made me think of what am I to do after this ends, or the post-COVID or the post-lockdown. Not just regarding my skills as a professor of literature or as a practitioner of curriculum designer and working with education. I've spent a lot of time watching TV, frankly. Much of my time was watching American politics, and having lived there for a number of years and seeing what was going on just blew my mind away. I thought that this could never, ever happen there. I could see it in other countries. I could see it in my country. We have 60 political parties, 60, not 16. And I used to think that it's because of this huge spectrum or large number of politicians or political parties that has ruined the setup of the country or made it a successful one. But it seems whether there are too many or just two, politics is playing a major role in not really connecting people together. The pandemic has been politicized to a degree that really has made me now look at literature that is more related to NGOs, what they're doing in Lebanon, certain foundations. I just got to know today of, let me see, it's a German Friedrich Eric Stiftung or whatever, something that has been in the country for a while. So I am really trying to garner what I've been taught and acquired for the past 40 or 50 years of my life, to reshuffle them and put them in a new way that would enable me to continue, because I cannot see myself going back or teaching, let's say, Shakespeare or teaching Byron or teaching, there's more important thing to be done, and that is to work, as I talked in the past with Rick and Maciel, interdisciplinary personality and culture, not just academics. I can be an interdisciplinarian in that classroom. I can do excellent research. I can do projects. I can teach my students to do so. And they did that once. But once they are outside of the classroom, their communities are so choked by this divisive cultural environment that my interdisciplinarity, while I can be a great one in a classroom, I fail outside. Look at the programs in the US. I mean, I used to feel so jealous of the programs, the availability of this and that, great big titles. And I wish I could join one of them. But after what I've seen on January 6th and what is still going on, there is something hitting, and the pandemic has exposed it. And we have to learn how to get skills for the real world, not just for the classroom. And I'm trying to do so. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Allison?
So I feel a little awkward because my story is very different. For years now, I have been very, very particular about insulating myself and protecting myself, my spirit. I don't watch the news. I don't watch TV. If it wasn't for my mom, I probably wouldn't even have a TV in the house. I don't go to the movies. I read a lot, but I'm very careful about the images that invade my space because my spirit can't take it. And I've learned that, especially as an artist, that I need to be protective of my spirit. And so when I talk to other people and I hear about their fight to remain hopeful and their disappointments with everything that they're reading and that they're hearing and that they're seeing, I find it very difficult to say that not much in my life has changed because I refuse to allow all those negative messages in. So I'm very particular about where and when I get my information. It's a very narrow stream. I took what Maya Angelou said very, very much to heart when she said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. So the first time that I got a message, I didn't need to hear anymore. So I have insulated myself in that way. And so that has protected my ability to work. It's protected my ability because I'm constantly creating, whether that is a different multimodal way of releasing information, disseminating information, whether that is how I interact with other fields of knowledge. I have the space to do that because my heart and my spirit aren't weighed down by some of the things that I hear about. And I say it's been also very interesting to be in Alabama, right? Because we are a red state. We are very conservative as a general rule. Even our liberals are conservative, really, for the most part. I'm in a very rural area. So I understand a lot of the challenges in talking about diversity when the only people you know look like you and have lived next to you for 50 or 60 years. And so there's a lot of change is not a big word here in my world. And it's been very interesting to see how it's impacting other people around me, but not necessarily impacting me directly. And I just want to say that I've just been very deliberate about that. And so, my practicing of my artwork and my interdisciplinarity hasn't really changed that much. So that's my part of the story.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. What has stood out to me is perhaps, and maybe we can, highlight, because one of the goals is to have takeaways from this talk. And what I'm hearing a lot about is how we're all processing this bombardment of information, if you will, right? Information, I like what May said, how the pandemic, has been politicized. And that, how do we handle this bombardment of misinformation, dare I say, and to weigh what is. And that's part of the skills, I think, that we in the classroom attempt to teach our students, right? We teach our students, you know, in the research process to evaluate and to weigh and to look at the source and to be critical. And sometimes when we're living it, and I really appreciate May's comment about, you know, but when you're living it, like there's a, you know, you do it in the classroom, you do your research in your office, and then you live. And how we have maybe even lived these kind of, you know, monodisciplinarily, I'm making up words, but we have lived separately, but in a way for us to practice it. So I pulled that out, and it made me think about Danny's, you know, comment about the various dimensions, the dimensions of our life. So it made me think about a lot, and I saw a lot of questions in the chat. And so I want to go from there. Can we do it? So we know, I'm just summing up what I've heard. Allison, she's still able to do it professionally because she makes a deliberate effort to block out, where maybe others of us, we don't have that type of discipline. I've never watched so much television before in my entire life. My mother would have a heart attack because she doesn't like TV. But it's like I'm you know, it's luring me in to what's the latest thing that's going on? What did Dr. Fauci say? And so how do we take what we teach and put it into practice? That's what I'm hearing. Right? How do we, the interdisciplinarity that we teach, how do we put that into practice? So that's the next question. You know, Danny, as a professor of interdisciplinary studies, May, and when you would teach in English, or, you know, the work that you would do, and then Allison as an artist, how do you do interdisciplinarity within this particular context? I'll start with you, Allison, since we ended with you, and then we'll go back around and end with you, Danny.
Okay.
So, well, yeah. So interdisciplinarity looks like, for me as an artist, right now, I'm not doing as much work in my doctoral field as I am in my master's and bachelor's field, because I'm teaching voice, strictly teaching voice. So, but it looks like being the specialist for all of the areas that I'm integrating. So I don't work in a team per se, which is always a very interesting dynamic when I talk to a lot of other interdisciplinarians who have their own specialty, and they partner with other people who have their own specialty, and they bring those in and they have this conversation. I talk to myself a lot because I'm trying to talk through my understanding of the various fields that I'm using and engaging with, because there is no other person. And so for me, what I'm doing in the classroom is more about getting my students to make connections that they don't, that they think that learning is in a vacuum, and that what we do as voice learners or voice as singers has nothing to do with what they're doing in chemistry or biology. And yet it is a learning process, and it's how they learn and how they take information and utilize that. And so it's a very light connection to interdisciplinarity, unless I can really get them to engage with me on, and that is actually my challenge, is getting them to engage with me and thinking about how they think, and thinking about what it means when something that they learn. So when we're talking about how to breathe and their posture, how does that impact what they're learning in biology or physiology? Like, did you learn this particular piece of information? They're like, oh, wow, yeah, hey, wait, we just talked about that. But if I don't help them make those connections, then they think that they are in this disciplinary silo, if we will, right? And so I think of that as my main goal in interdisciplinarity in my classroom, is getting them to see that their learning is we're not just doing this one thing, that it really actually touches other places where you are. And if I can get them to even think about that for one other class, like, then I consider myself very successful.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. May?
Well, as you know, as I'm not teaching, it's really quite a different kind of experience than yours, Alison. And I do envy you the ability to be able to create the two spaces, one for yourself that is insulated and self-protected, and the other one that is so much engaged with the students and how they can connect with what they're doing in an interdisciplinary way. The way I believe, to me, the way, if I'm to be doing interdisciplinarity in lockdowns, actually, I would rather focus on how much I can discover about myself rather than closing in into what I have, but more into looking as to what I don't have, and yet it's there somewhere. So looking up with networks, it's making really rather kind of creative, because I'm trying to come up with ways of connecting with NGOs in Lebanon, because they are the ones who are working on the ground. And probably see how I would fit in one of their programs and be involved in some of the organizations or the societies that are more into the real hands-on experience with the people rather than in the classroom. That's where I think now my role is going to be. And definitely, by the way, regarding the comment regarding Shakespeare, of course, Shakespeare is the most interdisciplinary writer ever. I mean, I teach Zoophilia in Shakespeare, for that matter, in Midsummer Night's Dream, definitely. But what I meant regarding teaching is that I want to move my experience outside to young people in I don't know, in projects, in go to schools, visit. I do something that is not so structured as a classroom, and be more on the ground and see what people are doing. Parents, I don't know. I'm still exploring the ways to do that. The situation in Lebanon has hindered me really to carry on what I had planned to do back since 2019, ever since I came back from Amsterdam. And I haven't been able to do much about it. So hopefully, I mean, the isolation has really chances for us to be creative and get to do more networking, discover ways of connecting with people. I mean, it's easier to meet with you guys from different parts of the world online than if we were to meet in a conference, probably. So isolation is good in many ways. And I hope I'll be able to find more ways to deal when it's post-COVID. Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm going to go to Danny because I don't want to put my own stuff. So good. But thank you.
Before I address that question directly, I think I'd like to follow up with the previous question and Allison's and May's responses, because it seemed to me, again, using the theoretical framework here, we had the thesis, for example, with May, and then we had the opposite with Allison. And I was just saying, wow, well, the middle ground seems to be the healthiest way. Yes, you moderate what you do see, you take control of it, but you don't, because we are living in and things are happening. So it's that synthesis that seems to be the sweet spot. Thank you, Marks. I mean, so anyways, you can see that this is really the way life is really working, two opposing arguments. Now, in terms of the classroom and how the teaching and relating to students, I basically really feel obligated to begin with trying to get them to appreciate knowing thyself, Socratic thing, right? Let's start there, and let's do it by asking, critiquing and seeing, where's this information? Why are you here? What are you learning? Have you ever thought about the validity of this and where's it coming from? Are you just taking it in like a sponge, and some do it better than others? But no, you have an obligation as a student to and responsibility to ask some questions. First of all, there are, again, some of these parameters that we're all ensconced in, can never change. Everything we know, humans are involved in it. I just put that out there as a truism to them, a universal. So if humans are involved, ultimately, we live, we grow, we're in different places at different times. We experience different things, our perspectives are different. Therefore, what we are discussing in this textbook here, and the authors say this and that, someone wrote the book, someone lived at a certain time and space. So that means we should infer that what we're learning is partial. What we're learning is incomplete and perhaps fragmented. Now let's appreciate that, because it gives you a freedom as a student to just to take it on as a habit, because you can't escape that either. And neither can the people who say this is the canon, you have to learn this. No, but what it does do then is you need to ask yourself as a student, well, why am I learning this incomplete partial stuff? It has to do, again, with the notion ultimately of power, of privilege. Who wrote the books? How do you get it? Why am I standing here talking to you as I am and you're taking it in? So in a sense, there's these dynamics of power, position, and that's fashioning our knowledge as much as anything. And if you think the power source of the power is not inescapably biased, maybe not intentionally, well, then you need to question that too, because that is in fact the case. So that's kind of the way I would like for them to engage their interdisciplinarity, by always looking at the lived experiences, their own, and the lived experiences of the source of the people who provide this information, so-called education, to us. And I leave it at that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. What has stood out to me from all three of your responses would be the practicality of engaging in interdisciplinarity, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's outside of the classroom, retired or not, that looking for ways to create this praxis that is meaningful for whatever the situation is. I think, Danny, you said the lived experiences, right? The lived experiences of the interdisciplinary, and then even, if you're as fortunate, to be transdisciplinary in the process. And so, you touched on it, and I want us to think about what, and you've given some examples in terms of what being reflective of where we are now, 11 months into this pandemic, and whatever your professional and personal situation has been, then what would be some of the takeaways that we can consider and then build upon. And so I've been jotting down what I have been able to chat. It moves so fast. So Jennifer's gonna address some of the direct questions, but what has been standing out to me are aspects of practice, power, privilege, isolation. And to me, it's like an oxymoron, because if you're doing interdisciplinarity, can you really do that in isolation? How does that work? Because what are you integrating? Like your multiple selves? Do you become like a multiple personality disorder? This is the space for that. And let me just disclaimer, no disrespect to anyone experiencing any mental challenges, but I am processing what does that mean for myself? And then also, this is an opportunity, I think, for the creative development of all of ourselves, whether we're scientists, social scientists, whether we're, natural scientists, if we're in the humanities or the fine arts, that it's an opportunity for us to be creative and to think, right? You know, this crossing boundaries and boundary pushing and to think outside of the box, it's an opportunity to do that. And so I say all of that to say, what would be perhaps a takeaway, even if it's not fully flushed out, that we can share in terms of this experience of attempting, and I say that loosely, to engage in interdisciplinarity in our, whatever our circumstance is. And I think one thing that I appreciate already, just in the 30 minutes that you've been sharing, is the complexity, but the beauty of the complexity and the diversity of the experiences. And that's something I think that sometimes we think, oh, everybody's having the same experience as me, but everyone is not. And so then how can we build upon that and to use that and to decipher through it and integrate it? So that was a really long question. But from whatever you picked from that, just to a takeaway, maybe something that you really want the rest of our roundtablers to hear, and then we'll open it up for questions as well. And so we'll start with you, May, and then I saw your face, and then we'll go to Danny, and we'll end with Allison. Thank you.
No, it's rather long and many talking points regarding the question. I mean, to me, one of the takeaway, because I'm sure the more we think of the question, you know, other takeaways would come up, and we would rethink of our positions and our, you know, the one thing that I have to keep in mind is to keep my sanity. And when I say sanity, I mean really the mental health issue, because we've been talking a lot, or at least, you know, I mean, as I watch TV and following COVID's news here and there, you know, the physical problems, but the psychological ones, only recently did people get to, or the physicians or those involved get to look at it. I mean, people are really suffering nervous breakdowns. I mean, the rate of selling Lexatenil and Xanax in Lebanon has wired. But what is more important is the mental health of students, those who are doing online. How do we reach out for them? I mean, the rate of suicide, at least from what I heard a couple of days ago on CNN, youth, you know, committing suicide as they're doing online learning, not because of the teachers, but then again, the isolation and the lack of personal physical contact in a classroom, the normalcy that they used to have. So how do I deal with that if, you know, I have nephews and nieces who are, I mean, I have a 4-5-year-old who's doing Zoom, KG3. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, online learning by so many standards has not fully achieved its goals because it's following traditional curricula. And the teachers are more into, I mean, I know from my colleagues at the Lebanese University, I mean, the English department, I mean, they have to finish a syllabus. They have to finish the courses per se, rather than, I mean, I think something else should be done, more liberal curricula, more a curriculum that would address the students. I mean, our lives have changed, their lives have changed. So the curriculum must change. And I wish they could read more of Julie's books on, you know, changing the culture on campus and changing the university's curricula and adopt programs, I mean, interdisciplinary or whatever, but something that really is livable, not just in fiction, but livable, you know. So I would say things that relate to curriculum, I would say that have to be worked on. More research or more attention to the mental health, whether of us or of students, And though I thought I never would say this or never thought myself be involved in politics, the politicizing of people's miseries and pandemics. It is, I mean, wearing a mask has become political. In Lebanon here, still people don't believe that there's corona. Some of them don't want to wear masks because the government is asking them to do so. Not the Democrats, it's the government, whatever it is. So I don't know, much to be taken in as well. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Danny?
quite a bit there, May. I think if there's a takeaway, I think that's can capture many things. It's the ability for us to willingly or unwillingly to embrace the undoing that we have, our habits and that kind of thing. But it's much more complicated than that. But it's the undoing of our own recognition and valuing what we know. That takes courage, but to resolve this, when we get into a tension, in a tension-filled situation of contradictions, and we obviously can see there's an empiricality in, what we see, touch, feel, our senses, and then how do we align that with our belief systems, the way the logic that we use based upon our own experience, and acceptance of our prejudices and our biases that we cannot change because of our history. Understanding that's our bucket, but then we see these things that absolutely contradict the message in those buckets. Are we willing to recognize that this is an encounter? And I'm suggesting that by undoing or negotiating that, face really up front, the undoing creates another space for recreation. It's almost like we don't go very far if we hold on just to what you know. You're not advancing. You'll never learn anything if you don't make errors and mistakes. The real learning comes from falling down, right? But learn to get back up and that kind of thing. So I really think the takeaway, because we can never escape instances where there will be contradictions, self-contradictions, and contradictions between this and the other. So in a sense, how do we deal with the other within us? And recognizing that in fact we do have another within us, and it's problematic and it's difficult, but it can be result in something when we don't hold on to it, for example. And to show you the obviousness of holding on, for example, the previous president in the pandemic, right? Oh, it's going to go away. There's this, never admitting in a way that is honest, pure understanding. No, this is killing people. No, the numbers are going to go up. No, this is going to get worse. So it was a holding on to something more valuable than, so this is the mental part in conflict with the empirical physicality praxis part. Real problem, not authentic at all. So I think that's a takeaway for almost everything that we are doing.
Thank you. Allison?
I think if I could offer a takeaway, that what that would be is that even in the midst of all of this, there is wonder, and there is an ability to be creative, and there is a space for that. I can't speak for other folks, but I can speak for, this has been the most productive time I won't say in my whole life, but it certainly ranks right up there in the most productive time of my scholarly living. And I think that where we choose to put our energies is, like we were talking, I think, Danny, in the beginning, you were talking about a choice, and not making a choice is still a choice, right? But there are choices about what we're going to take away. And I've made the choice that I want to take away wonder, that I want to take away something that is beautiful and that is positive in the midst of all of this. So I bring to it the fact that I'm an only child, so spending time by myself has never been an issue. Right. I grew up in a rural situation, so I had cousins, but I couldn't always go play with them. So I had to entertain myself and be with myself. So that has always been a thing that I've taken with me. So being with myself was always a possibility, but not a liability, but a probability that I would be by myself and doing these things. And so Khadija, you even said something about like, so how do you do interdisciplinarity by yourself? Yeah, I do have a lot of conversations with myself. There's me over here and I over here and myself, and we just have a great time talking, and we're working out things. And yeah, so, but in the midst of trying to figure out what we're doing, I really want to say that I think it would be a shame if we miss the opportunities that come because we are sitting still for the first time and who knows how long, because we've been busy, we've been running after this or going here and having this meeting and going to there and thinking that all of these things outside of ourselves were so important, when the reality of the pandemic has shown us that a lot of the things that we really valued weren't as important as we thought they were, because we've been able to let them go. And we've actually had to find other things to replace them. So that would be my takeaway. It's like, how do we walk away with something positive from it? And I think that is different for everyone. But that would be my takeaway, that this time not pass us by without us walking away with something that is wonderful and that is creative and that is uniquely ours.
Well, I thank you. And there, the chat has just been stirred up from your comments. And I would say that what I have been able to capture, and then I'm going to turn it over to, we could either address what's in the chat or folks can just unmute and talk, to highlight the benefits of technology that has been used as a tool to bring us together in ways that it hasn't before. Also, I like the wonder of embracing the undoing, and then how we can reconfigure that in a way to engage in perspective taking and ways of seeking common ground. The holistic aspects of our mental, social, professional selves, and then also increasing our awareness and sensitivity. I think if anything else, it has moves us out of our silos, and we have been exposed to see others. And I really thank May, Danny, and Allison for, they have stirred up my brain for sure. And I hope they have done the same for you. And so I'm gonna open it up for if anyone wants to talk their question. We have about 10 minutes where we can engage in continued discussion. I saw Rick has already unmuted. Is that true?
It's true, but that didn't mean I had to say anything.
Okay.
But I'm just curious about May and the whole, because she hasn't actually talked that much about the explosion. Her city was ripped apart just a few months ago. And since Gretchen has kind of invited us to mix the personal and the scholarly here, I'd be curious to hear more from May about how the explosion has changed her way of seeing the world.
It was a moment of wonder. Although I've lived, years of civil war, of bombing and shelling, hiding in shelters from whatever bombardments going on, it was something I've never experienced in my life, sitting downstairs in the building, waiting to be picked up, and the I don't know what to call it in English, when the explosion and the wind, the blast, it threw me and my helper back, it was, you know, a couple of seconds. And then I realized that something has severely changed. And 5 months now after the blast, I and many other Lebanese have become, unfortunately, desensitized because of the stagnant way the government has been dealing with the reconstruction. And I mean, there are still houses that are without roofs, people, I mean, that are still displaced. And we are living, I think, the new norm. I mean, it's difficult for us now to differentiate between the pandemic and the explosion. I mean, the problems that have been created by something from, you know, a medical, you know, kind of illness to something that is out of human corruption and lack of, I don't know, but I have managed to, like many others, to know that I can live without Nescafe. I have to, you know, go for something else, you know, something made in Turkey or something made generically in Lebanon. No more Nescafe in the country. So I'm getting used to that and to new tastes, new things to buy, different things to buy that it's the whole thing, you know, the dollar you can't see anymore. So I have to imagine it again and again. But it has been difficult. And I don't know, still struggling with it. I'm sometimes on Xanax, I don't hide it, but I mean, we try to survive one way or another. I always pick up the positive and they're always crossing boundaries. We have to.
Thank you, May.
Thank you. Sorry for that.
No. Thank you for sharing. You really, you know, if I can, Jen, the whole board was had you in our thoughts and concerns. So thank you for sharing that. Gretchen, go ahead. You can unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself?
There we go. Yeah. As most of you know, I'm always bragging on one article or another that we've had in issues. And I did just want to mention in this connection, inspired by what May just had to say, I think Sten would agree, one of the best articles we've ever had, and if you've read it, I think you'll agree too, was by one of Sven's colleagues, a woman called Jennifer Schultz, that teaches an interdisciplinary course at Seattle University on trauma, on witnessing trauma and dealing with trauma. And she wrote, what, just a year or two ago, Sven, a truly spectacular article about this course. Of course, this was before everything happened more recently, but encouraging students to choose subject matter and connect in a personal sort of way, as well as a professional way, with trauma, and do super projects that were both very professional and hugely personal and deeply felt. It's just a terrific article about teaching that deals somehow with trauma in a very interdisciplinary way.
Thank you for that. You can go to our website. I'm plugging too. www.interdisciplinarystudies.org for more information and to see copies of issues. We're also on EBSCO. Did I cover everything? And come to our conference in Roz, help me out. I just drew a blank in my commercial. Where
at Southern Utah University,
yes.
October 14th to 16th of this year, all virtual, first time for AIS.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Go ahead, May. Yes.
I mean, I've been reading trying to catch up with the comments, and as Jennifer may have mentioned, that I do think, yes, the rioting in Lebanon is one symptom of the extreme stress and pressure of how much one's mind can handle the lack of stability. I mean, not just the loss of people you love, but the loss of your livelihood and becoming, destitute psychologically and emotionally and economically. So we tend to see people screaming and just yelling and swearing on TV, especially when they attack the beautiful historic building of the municipality in northern Lebanon yesterday and burnt it to the ground. And they just, threw Molotov bombs. I mean, rioters. I mean, that's how they express. Do I blame them? Yes and no. Problems, demands, and violence somehow have become that's the only way we can get people's attention, or we can get the government's attention. And on the other hand, people are looking for problem solving, Michael, regarding, the resiliency in being able to, how to handle the violence, how to handle the rioting, how to handle this. There must be more work on the youth outside, on the ground, to really tell them that there are people listening. I watch CNN, and I wish for once I could hear one of the newscasters saying, let's know what these people want. Those who came instead of keep calling them names, let's discuss what they want, who they are, why like this, and not just looking at the symptoms. Let's go and see why they are like this and help out and do some problem solving. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. If there is anyone, if you don't want to, you do not have to ask or pose your question through audio. You could put it in the chat if you wanted to, or you can provide. I'll do Maciel, and I'll just tell everyone that thank you, Sven. He put a link to the article in the chat if anyone wanted to review that article on trauma. Thank you. Maciel?
Well, thanks to all three presenters with their sensitive and really inspiring stories. And it makes me, and I think several of us, wonder. So typically interdisciplinary studies is about showing different disciplinary insights into a complex problem. But now your stories also bring in some different personal attitudes to the current situation. And typically as scholars, we distinguish between personal attitudes on the one hand, and then disciplinary knowledge, scholarly input on the other hand. But I'm wondering to what extent you've experienced, both personally and also maybe in the responses of your students, whether actually the two go hand in hand. And as scholars, as teachers, we have to show maybe how the knowledge that we bring, the different perspectives that we can see as scholars, also have an impact upon our personal attitudes, maybe our sensitivities, our emotional responses, in a way teach a kind of a personal example or model how we navigate both knowledge and effective responses. So I'm really curious to hear that more personal reflection from you.
I can start with that, Makia. So first of all, I'm an autoethnographer. So I tell my personal stories as examples of research in a larger community. A very real thing for me that has happened in the pandemic. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had that choir rehearsal gone very, very, very bad, with lots of people dead after a church choir got together. They thought they were doing okay in terms of social distancing, and a lot of them died. And so I teach voice. That's a problem. That's a problem. I don't see what is currently my livelihood being promoted as something that you want your graduating senior to come in and register to be a voice major for anytime soon. So I've also come into, so my very real situation is how this is a very precarious spot for me. We have a limited number. I always have intimate classes. My classes are one-on-one pretty much. But I have 3 students now. 3. That's it. And I teach from home. It is a very personal impact here. But in the midst of this pandemic and being productive, I'm going back for a second doctorate in instructional technology, because I need to understand how technology is going to impact the arts moving forward. In particular, I need to understand how it's going to impact voice and singers and singing and theater, which I'm also very much a part of, and how is it going to impact that and what is happening? Because all of my artsy people are saying, oh, this is going to go away and we're going to go right back to where we were. And I'm just not seeing the world like that. For all my insulatory practices, I just don't see that we're going to go back to a world where technology is not going to be a part of the arts. And so I'm making it a part of what I do. And I'm making that choice to bring that in. And so when I talk to my students, I ask them questions. How is technology working for you? Is this happening for you? I'm asking teachers, how is this happening to you? So the research that is in my head is very much right now being impacted by my livelihood and where I am and what's going on in the world. So it is very much a very personal thing that's happening.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Danny, did you want to say something to that?
No, just very interested in what Allison was saying, because it's absolutely true. We won't be coming, I don't think, out of this like the old normal. Technology is there. It's here. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We wanted to respect everyone's time and energy, and I really, really thank you for taking the time to share, to engage, and for some even to catch up. So we will have ongoing discussions just like these. So please do check your email and social media and the Interdisciplinary Studies website. And so I am done, but also join me in thanking please our major speakers on our roundtable. Thank you to May, Danny, and Allison. And Jennifer, do you have anything else that you want to say? I will defer and give Jennifer the last words, and I wish
You can wish everybody well after me. I mean, I'm seeing a call for social Zoom. This is actually something we had talked about. Would, AIS members come to a social Zoom? And at least everybody here seems very enthusiastic about that. So yes. We will get that out and see how that works for people. I really just like to thank everyone, presenters and participants, for coming, for showing up with this, for experimenting with this format. We will be reaching out, asking, was an hour enough? Should we, how is the balance of conversation and chat and all of that? We're very multimodal in addition to being very interdisciplinary right now. I noticed people were holding it together quite well, tracking what was being verbally said and tracking what was being written in the chat. And there's just so much energy, so many questions that of course we could keep talking, but part of the sort of the formal pressure was to keep to an hour. And maybe see how we think within that sort of border or zone. But if you didn't get your thoughts in, feel free, post on Facebook, tweet at us, just send us some email, let us know what you'd like to see so that we can do more of what's working and more of what people feel like they'd like to be engaged with, especially now. So I'll turn it back to Khadijah to wrap up.
May I say something?
Yes.
Yes. I want to thank you, Khadijah, for doing a really extraordinary job as facilitator and for initiating this concept and sharing it with all of us and collaborating with all of us as we do so well. And I think that this first roundtable has been really marvelous and is the start of something big.
Thank you, Roz, and thank you all. Thank you, Makia. And everyone have a good day and
Thank you.
evening, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody stay well and safe.